Hey everyone, how's it going? Today's video I just wanted to maybe offer some clarity over one of my previous videos about how to run backing tracks, specifically referring to this video here. Mainly just to clear up some of the comments or suggestions that I've had in the comments, which are actually really good, very valid points. So I've got 10 reasons why you might want to do this particular setup that I've suggested. Now, just before I go into those 10 points, remember the channel is called Band on a Budget. So if you're a professional or a self-proclaimed professional, why are you here? My backing track video, and this video in particular, is more targeted to people who are just starting out, people who aren't too familiar with running backing tracks and just need to get their foot in the door on how to actually run backing tracks. The first reason being this particular setup is much more cheaper than running an audio interface and a laptop. In the video I did use a laptop as the audio source, but you could use any kind of audio source or device like an MP3 player or a phone. A few cables here and there and a couple of DI boxes is far more cheaper than getting an audio interface. So if you are on a budget and you don't want to fork out a couple of $100 for a decent audio interface and a couple another $100 for a laptop, then this might be the option that you want to choose to use. So second point, why all the cables? Why do we need them? Why do we need those DI boxes? It's more for flexibility, and you don't actually need to have all those cables. I know I showed in one of the examples having the click track and the backing track going into a DI box and then sending a signal from that DI box to a mixer. To be honest, no, you don't actually need the DI box. You could essentially plug straight into the mixer, but all these like extra cables and the DI box is more to give you flexibility and more control over your monitor or your monitoring mix. Point number 3, the DI boxes. Why do I have 2 of them, or why are we using one of them when you could just plug straight into a mixer? You don't actually need to use the DI box. You could go straight into the mixer and that's totally fine, but the DI box does serve a purpose, and that purpose alone is really dependent on the situation that you're in. So here I have a DI box, okay? Here's your input, that's where your source signal is coming in. You then have a parallel output. That's taking a copy of this first input signal and you can send it to a different audio source. Maybe that's a preamp going into your in-ear monitor mix or some other mixer for monitoring, okay? So that's why you'd probably want to use that. This particular DI also has a unbalanced output. I don't usually use this one, I just use the input and the parallel output. On the other side, we have a balanced output. I have just turned a jack input into an XLR, okay, XLR output. Now I can use this and plug straight into a mixer, especially if the mixer doesn't support a jack input. I have on this DI here a polarity switch, which is going to allow me to invert the signal polarity, okay? And then underneath that, I have the ground switch. Okay, so if I'm getting a little bit of humming, I need to fix something in the some kind of earthing or electrical issue, that's what it's there for. Back onto this side, I also have an attenuation switch to reduce the signal coming in by either 20 decibels or 40 decibels. That's why you would want to use a DI, but you don't have to use it. So if you want to plug straight into your mixer, go for it. You know, there's nothing wrong with using the DI or not using the DI. Yes, the trade-off is you would be using more cables, but you have more flexibility. So reason number 4 why I would use this setup instead of an audio interface. An audio interface for running backing tracks most likely has to be used with a laptop. However, if you have multiple performers, multiple users with different backing tracks, you need to be able to swap in and out of these different audio tracks that they are supplying just using one cable. All they need to do is plug in a phone, laptop, tablet, any device that they have their audio source coming from, just plug it into this. Yes, you could use a laptop and you could use an audio interface, but that means whoever is doing sound needs those backing tracks, needs those audio files for the gig set up, ready to go. Some of you might be thinking, yeah, why don't you just do that? Why don't you just send the audio files to the sound engineer? To be honest, some of the gigs that I've done, I don't even know who's doing sound on the day. And if I need to contact them, I need absolute certainty that the person I'm working with is going to get it right from the beginning. Having a plug like this is interchangeable. It means I can take it to any club, any bar, no matter what kind of setup they have on stage, and I know that I just need to plug in a device and it should work. I don't need to worry about an interface. I don't need to worry about the sound engineer. It's good to go. Another example why I would use this setup instead of an audio interface and a laptop is if you're in a situation with music tutors or an end of year performance concert with the students of those tutors. Back in the day, we used to run end of year concert performances for students, and they'd be working on some songs, playing along to some backing tracks, and the tutors would supply them with the backing tracks. And this is always a different tutor, a different student. Sometimes the students turn up on the day and they want to change their performance piece because for whatever reason they want. And if I've already sent my audio file to the engineer who's then loaded it up into a laptop and then they want to change it last minute, it's going to be stressful for the sound engineer as well as the tutor and the student making sure that they got the right track. However, if the tutor or the student has a backing track specifically that they want to use and it's on their phone, you just plug into this. It's that simple. Okay, so for the fifth reason why I would do this particular setup, not everyone owns an audio interface and not everyone has a laptop, or at least a laptop that they want to bring to a gig. But let's say they do have a laptop, let's say they do have an audio interface, then you have to assume that they have the knowledge and the capacity to operate a digital audio workstation like Logic, Ableton, Pro Tools. They need to know how to make their backing track. For some people, singing along to a backing track or just playing along to an audio source is just a hobby for them. Maybe it's something that they do for karaoke, which is why I made that video in the first place with that particular setup. It's so that it can be translatable for people who are just starting out as beginners or people who have been doing it for years. For people who are using backing tracks as a hobby, there is a website called Karaoke Version which actually has all the stems or recreated stems of top 40 songs. And you can choose to use their online mixer and pan the signal to the left or the right, or put the click track somewhere in there to the left or the right, or right smack in the middle, and you just download the audio file. There's no third-party software needed. You don't need to own an audio interface with a digital audio workstation or recording software. You just use the website, download your audio file, and then load it up to your phone or device, and then boom, you're ready to go. Now onto the sixth reason. In the video, I gave you two different examples, one using a Behringer Micromon and the other one using a small mixer. Now for the small mixer, the reason why I would do this setup is, let's say I'm the drummer, okay? Let's say I'm playing drums and I've got a backing track coming in, I've got a click track as well, and I've also got the auxiliary monitor set from the band that's playing on stage. For me personally, I want full control over what I'm hearing in my in-ears, okay? It gives me more flexibility to what I want to hear in terms of the level, the EQ settings. I would much rather control what I need to hear on the fly than rely on a sound engineer that I may not have worked with before. There are some great sound engineers out there, but I personally may not have met them before. They might not know what kind of setup I particularly like, or what kind of sound or what kind of mix that I want. So it's just easier for me to just change it on the fly than to rely on a stranger. Okay, seventh, this is one that's particularly funny because there was a lot of comments about this one. Everyone was asking, ugh, mono, why would you do that in mono? Why not just run it in stereo? Stereo sounds so much better. Well, first of all, do you really need it as stereo? I mean, if you've got a monitor on stage giving you a mix of your band, your guitar, your vocals, that's coming out mono. If you're using in-ear monitors, yes, I can kind of understand why you want stereo. You just have a little bit more spatial presence in what you're hearing in your mix. But to do that, you're gonna need an audio interface. So again, if you didn't want to use an audio interface and you didn't want to use a laptop, then you're stuck with mono. But I'm not against stereo, okay? I think stereo is really great. It does serve a purpose, especially if you're doing a live show with your backing track and your full band, and you're also recording it live because you want that stereo sound coming through in the post-recording process or the post-production mix. Yes, that would be an option where stereo is what you need. Let's come back to a mono signal backing track for a second. Mono signal, is the crowd really going to care? Me personally, if I've got a mix that's stereo and I've got maybe a horn section panned to my left and then, I don't know, like a piano line to my right, then that means whoever's on the left side of the crowd is only going to hear the horns, but they won't hear the piano on the right side because they're standing in the wrong place. The only people that are really going to appreciate it would be someone who's standing right smack in the middle, kind of at the back of the crowd. So I kind of want everyone to hear everything equally. So there are pros and cons to using stereo or mono. They both equally have some good points and bad points. But if you're going to use stereo, just keep in mind that it is going to take up a couple more extra channels on your mixing desk. And if you're at a club or a bar and the mixing desk that they have doesn't support enough channels, you're going to have to run mono anyway, or bring your own mixer. And in saying that, I've been to clubs and situations where I'm really limited to how many channels I have on a disc, and mono is really the only option I have. With stereo, it can be done. You're going to use a lot more cables, and you're going to have to use an audio interface and a laptop. Okay, the number 8 reason, when you run a laptop with an audio interface, there is so much risk with having your laptop crash and fail on you. I've seen it happen before, whether it was a forced update right in the middle of a gig versus a corrupt hard drive, to the software not being updated or crashing, or for whatever reason, I've seen laptops fail. You might have a laptop that has worked with you perfectly fine and you've never had a laptop or a computer crash on stage yet. It's bound to happen. Okay, the 9th reason. Someone said, why not just play everything live? It's live music, just play live. Well, you know what? In the city or the town that I live in, I wish musicians were paid more, and I wish the budget of the bar had a lot more going for them so that they could pay musicians to do this. But we don't always have that option to do that. So then you might ask yourself, well, you could play in a 4-piece band and you can strip back the song and rearrange it to suit a 4-piece band. Yeah, you probably could do that. But if you want to stay true to the original record or the recording of that song, then using backing tracks is a good way to keep it authentic. Now, I'm not saying every show that you play at has to use backing tracks. I love live music. I love having horn sections on stage and a keyboardist and everything. I love that. Percussionist, great. I would totally buy into that if the budget allowed it and if bars and clubs paid us more. But maybe you're covering a song that doesn't use live instruments. For example, electronic dance music, hip hop. Maybe there's a drum section that needs a particular 808 kick or snare or clap, and you want to be true to the original song. Yeah, that's probably where you'd want to use a backing track or a live sample pad. If you can't afford having a live horn section, running a backing track with the horns is a good way to thicken up the sound and make it just sound a little bit more punchier, have a little bit more depth to the entire song. Maybe you're playing in a really small club venue and you can't fit that many musicians on stage, but you still want the crowd to appreciate the same amount of energy and the same thickness of music in this small club that they would have found at a bigger club. Like me personally, if I'm playing at a bigger club that has a bigger stage and I'm going all out with a massive thick sound, whether it's like a full band with all performing live musicians, or if I'm playing at a small club, I would want audience in the small club to still feel that same amount of energy that they would get from a bigger venue. I wouldn't want one venue to miss out on an experience that they could get at a bigger club. And this is where a backing track could come in handy to thicken up the sound for a smaller venue, when you've also got limited space on stage, being a small venue, and a limited budget. One other thing that I might just point out as well is, do we still hold a DJ up to the same scrutiny as a live performing musician? For example, a DJ can just play any song from the radio if they have the MP3 file or a CD, or I don't know if anyone still uses CDs anymore. But they can just play the CD, play the MP3, play the WAV file, and it's going to be like the source material. But if that DJ is also using like an MPC sample pad and they're adding their own kind of samples and triggers and remixing it on the fly, how is that any different from a live performer using a backing track? And for the final reason, number 10, if you're already using stereo backing tracks and you're using an audio interface with some kind of audio software or Dante, if you're already doing that, why are you even here? Like, why did you even watch the video, and why were you searching up how to run backing tracks? If you have a system or a setup that works for you and it's working well, don't change it, just keep it. Sure, you could look at how other people are running it, but if you've got something that works for you, just do it. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against stereo backing tracks. I'm not even against using audio interfaces or a laptop. I just have a preferred way of running backing tracks based on experience, based on the reliability, and based on the success rate of using backing tracks with that particular setup. Now, to finish this video, I'm not advocating for any particular way that you should run backing tracks or how live music should be played, whether you should or shouldn't use backing tracks in a live performance. That is totally up to you. If you want to run backing tracks, whether it's for a band or maybe you're a music tutor and you've got a student that needs a backing track to perform a performance piece or a recital. If you need the option to run backing tracks, check out the video. All I want to do is just give people some information on how you might want to go about running backing tracks, whether you're just starting out or you just need something quick and easy to do. For some people, using a laptop with an audio face and audio software can be very intimidating. You have to remember that when you're running audio software, you don't actually see the input-output of where the cables are going. So you actually have to envision it in your head that if the signal is coming in one point, you have to assign it to another, and this is all done digitally via the software. However, if you're running a backing track setup like the one that I suggested, you can clearly see where the source audio comes from, where it's going to, and then where you're going to then redirect it to or send it to another source. That is probably a really good way to teach someone about input, output, a signal path, or a signal chain. So if you're just starting out and you're new to the channel, that's the whole purpose of Band on a Budget. It's to get you started, give you a really simple method of doing it. To some people, it probably doesn't seem simple at all. And that's fine, because you've already got your own way of doing it, and you've been doing it for a while, in which case, your input is still valid, and it's good for people to know as well. With that said, thanks for stopping by. I'll see you around.